Tonight, new details on incoming Congressman George Santos's campaign finances. Records that his campaign filed with the FEC show 37 expenses that were just 1 penny below the threshold to keep receipts, $199.99. The filing also has several unusual expenses, including exorbitant amounts spent on air travel and hotels, and more than $10,000 in what are listed as rent payments to the company Cleaner 123. The company's address is a house on Long Island where Santos's district is located. Santos is also facing more trouble tonight over his rampant lies. Several of his campaign donors told me and my producer, Ali Gordon, they feel betrayed. But it's not just his donors. Voters in his district are also outraged. Some want him to resign. CNN's Eva McKend has the story.
I am completely betrayed.
In George Santos's Long Island district, the outrage is palpable.
George Santos is a fraud. I no longer support him.
Democrats and Republicans angry in the wake of revelations. Santos lied extensively about his personal background and credentials. Teodora Chufayan voted for Santos and was drawn to his positions on pushing back on COVID-19 measures in schools.
Kids! My child, my choice! My child, my choice!
But the Nassau County mom showed up at a rally this week organized by state Democrats to call on him to resign.
The whole persona that he created and the ability to deceive us is just so troubling. This man should not be allowed to be in office. And we all know it. I want to assure you, the Republicans know it too.
Among a slew of fabrications,
Shabbat Shalom to everybody.
Santos also misrepresented himself as Jewish and claimed his grandparents were Holocaust survivors, something genealogists say there is no record of.
He's a make-believe person. He's a person that's really not there.
Jack Mandel is a Jewish community leader who met Santos twice and thought he was the kind of fresh face the district needed. But now, given what you know now, if the election was tomorrow and you had to do it all again, would you vote for George Santos?
Absolutely not. Would not. I couldn't in good conscience. Once someone lies to me, I can never trust that individual again. The Holocaust is something that touches the heart of every Jew. And someone that would use that as a talking point, as a vote getter, I think is wrong.
But some say he should have the opportunity to further explain himself.
The man deserves his say, and he has to answer to a lot of personal questions why we're at this situation. The bottom line, at the end of the day, he has to own up to everything.
He hasn't done anything wrong as far as legality-wise. He admitted he lied, and most Christian people believe in forgiveness. Maybe not forget, but move on. Let's see what happens.
And disappointed voters are not the only concern for Santos. Federal and local prosecutors now investigating the incoming congressman, who is set to be sworn in next week.
So the responses somewhat varied. Even that Jewish community leader that we spoke to, even though he said he wasn't going to vote for Santos again if he had the opportunity, he wasn't outright calling for him to resign. One thing seems to be pretty consistent, though, in Manhasset, in Oyster Bay, in Great Neck. These communities, this is a very wealthy district, but these communities not always in the national spotlight. And I think that there is consistent disappointment that now it is because of this congressman-elect that has told so many lies that they are receiving this type of attention. I should note, though, that the district also includes parts of Queens as well. Pam?
All right. Thank you so much, Eva McKend. Joining me now is Democratic Congressman from New York, Richie Torres. Congressman Torres, we just heard from some of Congressman-elect Santos' soon-to-be constituents. What do you think about what you heard there? Do you think they deserve some sort of recourse now that we know they were lied to on so many different fronts?
George Santos should resign. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, he's a sociopath who has essentially defrauded the voters of New York State. And Mr. Santos not only lies, but he lies about his lies. He claims that he never lied about his work experience, that he only embellished his resume. He claims that he never said that he was Jewish, that he was only Jew-hyphenated-ish. And all of these lies would be laughable were the stakes not so serious, were not for the fact that this charlatan, this snake oil salesman, is about to become a United States congressman, and he's about to have access to sensitive information affecting matters of national security. When you're a member of Congress, you receive security clearance by virtue of the position you hold. And I have no confidence that a Republican-controlled House is going to protect the public from the future fraudulence of George Santos.
What about the donors in this case? I spoke with several campaign donors and people who attended his fundraisers today, and they told me they felt disappointment, they felt conned, betrayed following the allegations of fraud and misrepresentation against this incoming congressman. Should they get their money back?
I mean, George Santos should resign, and he should return every single contribution. And even worse than his lying is his possible lawbreaking. As late as May of 2020, he reported earning a salary of $55,000 a year. Then in 2021 and 2022, he reported earning somewhere between $3.5 and $11.5 million. That's an astronomical growth in his personal wealth that he's never fully explained. And he lent his own campaign over $700,000. And he claims the source of the money is the DeVolder organization, which he owns. But this organization is shrouded in secrecy. It has no public website. He's never revealed any of his clients on his federal disclosure as required by federal law. And so all of these are signs or grounds for suspicion and investigation.
And we do know that investigators are looking into this at the federal and local level. But as you know, he has maintained his innocence, saying he has never broken any laws. He's not a criminal. He's not a fraud. You plan to introduce a bill to require candidates to disclose under oath their employment, educational, and military history. It will be called the Stop Another Non-Truthful Office Seeker Act, which put together spells out Santos. But how do you think your Republican colleagues in the House should handle Santos once he is sworn in next week?
The Republicans should call on him to resign, and he certainly should be relegated to the margins. He should not be appointed to committees that have access to sensitive information. But the Republicans bear responsibility for George Santos. Elise Stefanik, who's the GOP conference chair and a member of the New York delegation, endorsed and raised $100,000 for George Santos. Republican leadership knew that he was a fraud and said and did nothing. And so as far as I'm concerned, the Republican Party is complicit in the fraud that George Santos perpetrated against the people of the United States.
And we should note, we've reached out to Stefanik's office, have not heard back. A donor did tell me that Elise Stefanik did introduce this donor with Santos. But also a lot of people I've been talking to today are saying, what about the Democrats? Where was their opposition research?
Look, there was a failure across the board, a failure on the part of the Democratic Party, on the part of the media. But ultimately, it's an indictment of the Republican Party. He's the Republican nominee. And no one in Republican leadership has said anything about him, even as a Republican DA has opened a criminal investigation into Mr. Santos. So we are owed an apology and an explanation from the leadership of the Republican Party in the House.